What is going on, everybody? And this is going to be my review for Bloodborne, which is exclusively for the PlayStation 4. Bloodborne is basically another entry into a series of games that is known as the Soul series. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, what the hell are you talking about? The Soul series? I don't see the word soul anywhere in the title of Bloodborne or anywhere else in the game. Well, Bloodborne was basically developed by the same people that made the Souls games, Demon Souls and the Dark Souls games. And when you look at Bloodborne and you eventually will play Bloodborne, you will see a ton of similarities with those games. Now, that can be a really good thing, but in some cases it can also be a bad thing as well. But we will find that out in this review. First off, let's talk about the graphics and presentation of Bloodborne. The graphics are pretty good. They are very good. They are not the best though, which is a common trend in the Souls games. The graphics in those games generally aren't the best, but they are serviceable enough. And I have to be honest, a lot of times when I was playing Bloodborne, I would notice quite a bit of pop-in effects and some screen tearing in some areas and some blur effects, which once again is another common trait of the Souls games. Even though Bloodborne's graphics are really good, they don't scream next gen to me. And for a game that is exclusive to the PlayStation 4, honestly, I expected better. I really did. But they aren't bad. Now, as far as the presentation of the game goes, the presentation is excellent. The settings, the environment that the game is in is just fantastic. And the funny thing, a lot of times when I was playing the game, I was just amazed at how well they actually did survival horror. Which is funny because Bloodborne and the Souls games, they're not meant to be survival horror games, yet they do survival horror better than actual survival horror games. Because of the difficulty of these type of games and the actual setting that your character is put in, there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of fear put into you. And sometimes you might be afraid to further venture into certain parts of the game because you don't know whether you're going to die or not, because you never know what's right around the corner. And the game does a great, great job at basically showing that off. Which reminds me of my favorite part of the actual game itself, and that was the Forbidden Woods areas of the game. And it's amazing to me how a game that is not centered on trying to basically spook the living crap out of you actually does a phenomenal job at it. That is why I love this area so much, because there were many times when I was legit afraid of basically wandering around the corner, not knowing what was going to be there because of how the woods were designed in the game, the fact that they were very dark, there was all these bushes and grass, and where they could hide any type of enemy they wanted to just jump out at me. I was legit worried at those parts of the game. And yeah, they just did a phenomenal job at that. And which also reminds me of how well done the enemies and the bosses are in this game. If you want a game that has enemies and bosses that define the word horror, this is the game for you. I mean, it amazes me, like, how can somebody come up with some of these designs? It's like, wow, it's like you got some sick people working at this company, because the enemies in this game and the bosses are just freaky. They are freaky as hell. I mean, you have snakehead enemies, you have regular human enemies, but they kind of look like zombies. Then you got giant rats. Then you got giant crows. Then you got just these rabid dogs that have half-eaten skin. And you got these giant ogre enemies. And of course you got your werewolves. There's just all these different types of freaky enemies. And they are all very well done. And none of them are, should I say, pushovers. Now, there will come a time in the game where you'll be able to kill some of these enemies easily, but that doesn't take away from the fact that when you first meet them, they are tough, and they're not stupid for the most part. Which is just one of the things about the Souls games that has always amazed me, is that the AI adapts to what you're doing. And that just, once again, adds more into the overall tension and presentation of the game. Alright, now let's talk about what is the most important part about this game, and that is the gameplay. Now, when you first start Bloodborne, you'll be thrown into a character customization screen. Now, honestly, I wouldn't recommend spending too much time customizing your character, because all of the clothing and armor items you will find later in the game, your character will mostly be covered up. So, I wouldn't recommend spending too much time on your character. Then, right after you create your character, you will be given an origin option. This basically decides what your beginning stats are for the game. But, in the end, it really doesn't matter what origin you pick, because you can then level up whatever stat you want to level up anyway to what you want that stat to be at. Now, I was kind of disappointed here because in the Souls games, the origin that you picked was also considered a class, meaning this was how your character was going to play throughout the game, for the most part. Because in those games, not only were your stats defined by your choice, but the starting equipment you get in those games. In Bloodborne, it doesn't really matter what origin you pick, because it just affects your stats. Your starting equipment is going to be the same no matter what, because you have 3 options of what starting weapon you want to pick, and then you have 2 options for a gun. And yes, that is what makes this game different from the previous entries, is that there's a gun. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought that was a really, really cool idea. Like, oh my god, you can fire guns in a Souls game now? Wow, that's pretty cool. Believe it or not, this gun is the replacement for the shield. I found one wooden shield in this game, and it doesn't act like a shield. So that pretty much means you do not have a defending item. That is also what makes this game different from the previous entries in the Soul series, meaning you can't be a tank. You can't run up and absorb damage and then hit back. You basically have to think on your feet a lot of times in this game. Now, that might be a bit of an adjustment to some people, especially for people who were playing the Souls games and they were used to being that heavy armor tank class. You can't be that in this game. Now, some also might see this as a negative, because the game kind of forces you to play their way. And I kind of have to see that as a negative myself, because what I liked about the Souls games is that there's many different options that I can play as. Like, I can be the heavy tank armor guy. I can be the light armor dodging guy. I can be the magic guy. I can be the archer guy. Whereas in this game, you can only play as how the game intends for you to play as. Especially in the beginning of the game. Now, later in the game, once you increase your stats and stuff, then you can start kind of playing how you want to play. But in the beginning, you basically have to adjust to the actual game itself. When you look at this game and the Souls games before it, you think of that this is just a third-person hack and slash action game, and it's not that. You can try to hack and slash in this game. You will be punished dearly for it. You basically... What I love about this game and the games before it, you have to be smart. It doesn't matter if you're fighting a boss. It doesn't matter if you're fighting a regular enemy. You can't just run in and just, with your fists flying and your sword swinging, you can't do that. You will get punished. You have to think. You have to know when to dodge. You have to know how the enemy is going to react. You have to know their actual movement patterns. That's what I love about this game. It keeps up the challenge. And what I also love is that the game basically doesn't let up at all. From the beginning of the game to the end of the game, you will be challenged. You will be challenged greatly. And it could be frustrating for some people. Especially in this game, because you have to play, like I said, you have to play this game how the developers intend for you to play it. You can't play it how you want to play it in the beginning. And that's going to frustrate some people. And honestly, it frustrated me sometimes. I remember when I started playing this, and a lot of people were saying, and I didn't believe them, by the way, a lot of people were saying, oh, this game is probably the hardest in the entire Souls franchise. And I was like, oh no, come on, that can't be true. Especially for longtime Souls veterans, because you would think that they'd be used to this gameplay by now. And when I started the game, I started thinking like that. I was thinking, oh man, maybe they did make this harder. Maybe they did just make this harder, and this might be the hardest entry into this Souls franchise. I don't agree with that now. And the reason I thought that back then is because I couldn't play my playstyle in the game. But once I adjusted to the game, and once I leveled up my stats, and was finally able to play as my playstyle, the game was a lot easier. And that's also kind of disappointing for me. Now, no way am I trying to say that this game is easy, because it is not. But, from my personal experience, I had an actual easier time with this game than any of the previous Souls games. And you can even look for yourself on my YouTube channel here, because I have several videos of me challenging some of these bosses in this game. And a lot of those videos were done on my first attempt. And for the record, I'm not lying in those videos when I put in parentheses as the title of those videos, first attempt, second attempt, 10th attempt, etc. I'm actually telling the truth. Some of these bosses I did on my first try, not knowing what the attack patterns these bosses have. I was just able to beat these bosses. So, in my personal opinion, the bosses in this game, for the most part, because there are some exceptions, are much easier than the bosses in the previous games. Alright, now for my final thoughts on Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a very damn good game, and it is another really good entry into the Souls series of games. However, I have to be honest here. After playing Bloodborne for a lot of hours, I have to say that I see Bloodborne as a stripped down version of the previous Souls games. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, to summarize it, there's a lot less actual content in Bloodborne as opposed to the previous games. For instance, there was only 22 or 23 different types of weapons in Bloodborne, and most of the weapons pretty much act the same way. Whereas in the previous Souls games, you had at least 50 plus weapons to choose from in the game. And that's not also including the shields you can find in those games that you could use to defend yourself, whereas there's no shields at all in Bloodborne. And also in the previous games, you had many more different types of pieces of armor and clothing you can find in the game, whereas there's a lot less to find in Bloodborne. And unless I completely missed it, there's no magic at all in Bloodborne. Now, I found some type of magic element weapons, and there's items that basically put a magic element into a weapon for a short period of time, whereas in the previous Souls games, you actually had magic. You could actually use magic. That's not in Bloodborne. To me, that added a lot of replayability into the Souls games. Like, for instance, you could do one playthrough in that game as a heavy armor person that takes a lot of damage and deals a lot of damage. You could then turn around and replay the game as a magic user. Or you can replay the game as a light armor archer. There we go again. There's not even any archery in Bloodborne. So it just seems like to me that there's a lot less content in Bloodborne. And I know throughout this review, and this might have annoyed some people, I'm constantly comparing the game to the Souls games. Because to me, it's basically another Souls game. And when I look at it and see that it has a lot less content compared to those games, it's kind of disappointing, and it doesn't want to make me, personally, replay the game as much as I replayed those games. Now, once again, that's not saying that this is a bad game, because it is not a bad game. I just can't help but feel kind of disappointed. So, basically, when compared to the previous games in the series, it's kind of disappointing to me. As a standalone game, it's very good. So, if you're a veteran of the Souls games, definitely pick this up because you will enjoy it, but you might feel kind of disappointed in some ways like I did. And if you've never played any of the previous Souls games, and you're looking for a great challenge, a great challenging game, then definitely pick this up because it is really good and you will definitely be challenged. Just bank on that. You will definitely be challenged. So, alright. I hope you enjoyed the review. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all later. Have a good one.